Yeah, so I figured, Korn Ferry Tour player, really good resume. What are some things, whether it's in your pro-ams or weekend games or whatever, that you see amateurs do that maybe are leading to higher scores aside from like, judging the technique?
Yeah, I'd say um, course management, shot selection and understanding their distances and what they're really capable of is the first thing. Like I think I remember Alex, we've worked with Mike together, but we also worked with Nick O'Hearn a little
Yeah.
bit. And he told me, if he were to go out on the course with a 20 handicapper, he would, just by selecting the shots for the person, he would probably shave 5 to 8 strokes off every single round. And
Well,
I
I
think there's truth. Yeah.
I think there's definitely truth in that. I think there's a lot of truth in the fact that people make golf, by the decisions they make on course, a lot harder than it sometimes needs to be.
Yes.
There's definitely
Yes.
a
You see them.
function to playing comfortably out there.
Yes. And um, a lot of amateurs, because it's a mechanical thing, but they typically don't have a real stock shot. I mean, I would say a typical stock shot for an amateur would be, for a high handicap amateur, would be a pull fade, right?
Yeah.
But when you don't have a stock shot, you don't have something to start with. You don't have a baseline of when things go wrong. This is kind of what my tendency is. This is where I'm going to miss the ball. I think like working with Mike, you know, he emphasizes the zones, starting it right. I mean, you can be a fader and have your zones too, but what he emphasizes is, missing it on the right side of the zone, starting it to the right of the target, trying to draw it back. And if you don't have a stock shot, you don't have a reliable miss. So you don't have, when you're on the course and there's, one side of the course is, you can't miss on, it creates a lot more stress. And I think to me, when I'm playing my worst golf and my most stressed golf, it's when I'm not starting the ball right, which is very rare. But when I'm not starting it right and my path gets a little bit more neutral or a little bit left, and I'm not starting the draws right, then and I start missing the ball left, that's the only time I feel really lost on the course. Um, so yeah, and then so when I'm doing that, I'll try to just go to a fade because I'll accept the fact that I can't hit the draw with my path, whether 7 irons, 3 and out or whatever. Maybe it's one left, and so I'll start hitting fades that day if that's kind of what my stock shot is. But you
Mhm.
have to be able to put yourself in a competitive environment enough to really get comfortable. You have to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? I mean, that's pretty cliche, but it's
100%.
true.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's where I tell guys, like, sometimes it's just about getting out and playing and learning
Yeah.
about what you're going to do under the heat of the moment and learning what you can play with, what you can't. That way we can kind of tailor things to that.
Exactly. And then another thing that amateurs, I would say, tend to do is they don't have a good, a consistent, reliable routine, right? I mean,
Right.
depending on what how they feel that day, the amount of time they spend over the ball could be 6 seconds or it could be 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And each second, makes a difference with the timing. Developing a consistent routine, not just in what you do and how you think, but in the timing of the routine, I think is very important over the course, especially over the course of a year. Um, it will save a lot of strokes. Even though it doesn't sound like it would, just being able to have your routine within a second of itself. And I guess one way of measuring that is the amount of time it takes between when you put the club head behind the ball to when you make impact. That's what Mike Bender emphasizes, is around 8 seconds is what a lot of the Grand Slam champions do. And so part of that's personality. Some people are quick, 7 6 7 seconds, and then some guys like Jack Nicklaus, I think, was on the slower end of that. I think he was about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
So a little bit, it's personality based. It's also, what's comfortable for you, but it's more important to just be consistent with what's comfortable rather than allow yourself to allow stress to take over the moment and change the way you go about your routine.
Yeah, and circling all that back to, I mean, like when we were working with Nick, that was something Nick at least was really big with me on, was, I
Yeah.
mean, we sat there and timed pre-shot routine for like an hour at a time, and just
Yeah.
you're going to hit shots and you're going to get it down to within a tenth of a second, basically.
Yeah.
And then from the course management thing, my first session with Nate, we're on the range warming up, and he was like, "Oh, all right, pretty good ball strike." I was like, "Yeah, I can hit it well. That's not the issue." So we get on the first hole. I just put one down the middle of the fairway at 142 over that front right bunker at Isleworth, tucked
Yeah.
pin, and I grabbed pitching wedge. And he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, that's wrong." But he goes, "Hit it anyway.
Yeah.
Hit it anyway." Put it right
Yeah.
in the lip, rolls back against the back edge of the bunker, and he goes, "Grab 8-iron." And I'm like, "What do you hit 8-iron to 4 feet, made birdie?" And there's a
Yeah.
difference between a 6 and a 3. Nothing technically
Yeah.
was wrong, right? It
Exactly.
was just
Especially.
purely course management and choosing the right shot.
Yeah. And that is, as your love, like playing level gets higher and higher, that becomes more and more important. In junior golf events on some easy courses with pins that are more in the middle of the green, you don't notice, and especially on soft greens. I mean, that's one of the problems that I found transitioning from mini tours to Korn Ferry was, even though the Korn Ferry courses aren't as demanding as the PGA Tour, you typically have, firm greens with tucked pins. Some weeks you won't, but the weeks that I did, I struggled on because I'd really developed hitting shots that catered to soft greens in Florida, because that's what I was competing on. And then, when you get out, especially at altitude, when the ball just travels further and there's less spin with the grass being a little bit longer too, it's you just have to constantly learn and transition to new conditions. But the course management, as you go from junior golf to amateur golf, high level amateur golf to professional golf, it becomes more and more significant, because every guy on the Korn Ferry Tour hits the ball well, right? I mean, no, there's some swings that don't look good, but even the guys that have bad swings, I mean, they're still good ball strikers.
Well, I think Ben always calls ball striking the price of admission, and then the rest of it's like,
yeah,
wins, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's kind of go on. I got some great questions in the comments that we'll definitely get to. But I was curious, in our first Zoom call, I suppose that was just last week, we kind of talked about aim point. Next, in a few weeks, I kind of want to do something involving some decade. I'm curious, do you implement a system, or do you learn the system and kind of take some elements and kind of use them to your advantage?
Yeah, with aim point, I've used the system for a long time. I had the original aim point book since I was probably 12 years old, and I still have it. I don't use it now. I haven't competed since they changed rules. I don't even know if you're allowed to use the aim point book anymore on the course, but it's great to practice with, just to get but you have to practice with it with a ruler to know that you're actually measuring the proper amount of inches outside of the hole. Because most people will read the aim point book and they see a 10-foot putt at 3% slope at 9 o'clock could, on a stimp 11 could break, I don't know, 30 something inches, but they don't know what 30 something inches is. So that's why they invented Express, to expedite the process, but also help with a visual of how much to play. So I use Express, and I don't go by it religiously. I'll still trust my feel and what I see with the greens. But I would say roughly by my Express on almost every putt. I mean, it's a good, if you just went by Express and you stroke the ball well and you have the speeds down, like, you're going to putt well, right? Like, but you still have to get a lot of experience practicing with Express, because you still have to be able to know in your feet what 1% feels like, what 4% feels like, and every week you kind of have to gauge how far your hand is from your face based on the speed. And so there are a lot of elements. It's not a perfect science, but it's data, and it's data that can help make your decision more easy, right? And I think like when you're out there in a stressful environment, any data you can use to make your decision-making process quicker and easier, I think it'd be silly not to use. Decade, I know you've always try to get me more in a decade, and I probably need to. I think that I
Well,
use a
I
lot of
know we at Q school we talked a lot about getting like you using it off the tee. Like
yeah,
that was a
yeah.
really really good thing for you, I
I
think.
like I like their flow chart off the
Mhm.
tee. I think their flow charts are great, and their data makes sense. I mean, I don't everything that I've read and listened to, I agree with. And
Mhm.
I think I used a lot of it with. I think even before I, got to learn a little bit about it, that I already implemented some of it without even knowing it. But the the system works, and the thing about a system is if you're going to use it, like you need to understand it, you need to use it consistently. That's the thing. Like for me with Express, like I use that every day. you
Yeah.
know that has to be a part of your routine. And once it's a part of your routine, part of your process, and you're using it consistently every single day in your training and in your competition, it just becomes second nature. And it just creates more confidence because you'll always have that data to gauge this with the decision making process.
Well, and I think that long term it might even help more than short term because you kind of and you end up with like a memory bank of
Yeah.
what has happened when you were in that situation before that you maybe wouldn't have
Mm.
even recognized
Yeah, exactly.
otherwise.
Hmm.
So I know you're still in recovery mode.
Yeah.
That's all going well, but what did a day of practice look like? Maybe you had 2 or 3 weeks off in between events on Korn Ferry.
Yeah. So if I had 3 weeks to prepare for a tournament, uh, I what I would do after, my tournament ended, I had 3 weeks, is I would look at the stats from the previous couple weeks, look at what I needed to work on, and then I would, for the first week, do a lot of practice on the range, on the putting green, very little on course. And I break my practices down into 4 categories. And I know Kyle's talked about this is, you have your mechanical work, your block work, your random work, and then your challenge work. And, before I go to the course every day, I'll either in the morning we'll put the plan together, or the night before we'll put the plan together. I don't lay out a plan for the entire week to start the week because I want to be a little bit more flexible, especially based on what I feel like. You could start the week off feeling like, oh, the last week I putted horribly within 10 feet, and then you practice for 3 days and you're making everything. And you're like, okay, well, I can, now change a little bit what I was doing. But the night before or the morning of, I always put a plan in place, and I, break down, the different elements of the game that I'm going to practice within those 4 categories. So I know before I go to the course, let's just say I'm working on my full swing, I have 1 or 2 drills that I'm going to, implement for my mechanics. And then my block work is, block work for me is mostly stock shot work, full swing shot work. It's not, it's not getting fancy. It's just the most basic, fundamentals, making sure your grip, your alignment, your posture, all the basics are taken care of. So I'll do block work, which is just repetitive work. It's the most boring of the practice work, but it might be the most important just because, as we said earlier, with like ingraining your stock shot, that's kind of what you're doing during the block work. And then the random work is the fun stuff. That's the, hit as Nick would have us do, like try to hit a 4-iron on a green from like 110 yards 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
be creative, be silly with it, like be a kid with it. Think back to when you were with your friends 8 years old practicing and just hitting silly flop shots or big hooks or big fades. You can do a little bit more, a little bit more mature version. I mean, one of the things I do with random work is I'll do and Nick, taught me in this too, was I'll do 125 yards. I'll try to hit 4 clubs that carry 125 yards.
Mm-hmm.
4 clubs that carry 150 yards, 4 clubs that carry 175, 200, 225. And, one of the things I did in the off season after 2020 was work a lot on my 3-wood and 5-wood because I, found myself performing well on par fives, but not due to my approach shots, entirely due to laying up to a good number and hitting good wedges. And the guys out on Korn Ferry and the PGA Tour have a lot of they have a lot of confidence from 225 to 275. And when you play the mini tours, and when you play a lot of amateur golf, actually you hit more of those shots in the mini tours, even because the mini tours you play, shorter, easier courses. You just don't find yourself on difficult par threes that are 225 to 250, and you don't find yourself on long par fives where guys that can really hit it are still going for the green. You play a lot of 500 to 540 par fives that on a good day you might be going driver into 7-iron into. So anyways, I know I just kind of went on a tangent.
No, you're good. And I'm not ignoring the questions on the side, but I do think this is a really good one. Chris asked, when you're looking back at your competitive stats, and this probably is a little bit of course dependent, but what are your ideal stats that you're looking for? I know Mike kind of has his baselines. Are you using those? And if they are, you can say them. Or are you looking at something else?
It's definitely relative. Obviously if you get on a course where the fairways are wide open and, for example, we like on the Korn Ferry Tour, we play this TPC, Colorado, just north of Denver. The fairways are, 80 yards wide. And when you're at altitude, the ball doesn't curve that much, so it goes straighter. And I mean, that week it would probably be, 80% would be satisfactory on a week like that. Whereas other weeks, it might be a tight, quirky course, like trying to think of a course like we play in Wichita. It could be 60% might be good that week. For me, off the tee, I care more about the no shots and the penalties and the out of positions more so than I do just the raw fairway numbers. Obviously with the decade, what they'll show too, like you'd rather, be a good lie in the rough from 80 yards than you would, good lie in the fairway from 150. So
absolutely,
it's more circumstantial, and I'll look more on the real world application of like, okay, I might have hit 4 fairways out of 13 today, but I wasn't out of position one time. And, of the 9 fairways I missed, 8 of them were good lies in the rough of the wedge, so you don't have to be too hard on yourself with just the fairway statistics. It's more about, the positions you're putting yourself. And then when it comes to the greens, obviously course dependent. Some courses, you're just going to have longer clubs in and hit less, but I would say I'm happy with 75%. Like that's a good number, right? If you can hit 75% over the course of a year, you're going to be one of the best in the world.
Well, yeah, because I think tour average is right now is like 9 fairways, 11.2 greens, which is like 62% or whatever, and then like 29 putts. It's kind of your base, like even par round.
But within that though, I note the greens to me are important because I'd much rather be putting, right? I mean, the weakness of my game is typically, some of the short-sided shots around the green. So I'd much rather have 50-foot putts all day than short-sided shots to tuck pins. But and my lag putting is definitely an advantage, something that I work on a lot, and that's a good part of my game. But the greens are important, but it's also very important to note how many, I call them birdie chances you have, which I consider a birdie chance. Anything inside 20 feet. Like that's to me, statistically, a 19-footer you're not going to make over 50% of the time, obviously, but it's still a good look. Yeah. And if you can give yourself a lot of those, and I think a lot for me would be anything over 8 is like satisfactory, in a round. And I find that when things aren't going well, let's just say you're having a bad day through 12 holes, you have 6 holes left. Sometimes a good goal is to just say, I want to get 4 birdie chances on the last 6. Even if the putts don't drop, you're still doing what you need to do to put yourself in a position, because a lot of guys will get off the course. And I think this happens on the mini tours a lot too. When you play easier courses, your ball striking isn't exposed as much. So you might hit 17 greens and think like, oh my God, I'm hitting it well. Why am I shooting even? And it's like, well, I mean, you're averaging 36 feet from the hole on the 17 greens, right?
You might shoot over par with that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, most guys would shoot over par with that. So that's an important thing to note, is not only how many greens you're hitting, but the proximity that you have for birdie, as well as when you miss the green, where are you putting yourself? Are they chips that you should reasonably get up and down, 2/3 of the time or more? Or are you giving yourself short-sighted looks that are really a third, you're going to get up and down a third of the time? So that's
talking
kind of where
short
the
game,
stress.
we're gonna steer off a little bit. Just talking short game for those
Yeah.
who don't know. Austin, what was it? Dakota's. The first time I saw it was
Yeah.
Dakota's tour at Dakota Dunes in our practice
Yeah.
round. You're like, what if I just hit this
I started
one-handed?
it. I started it with you. Yeah. I
Yeah.
started it on
So
Dakota's tour.
Austin hits most of his short game shots one-handed. Korn Ferry Tour loves him because it's marketable. But is that going to be the plan with the comeback? Is that going to stick around, or are you going to give it a shot at two?
As of right now, it's one. But I've
Yeah.
tinkered with a different position in my left hand.
Mm-hmm.
I put it. I used to have it by my side because I felt like it helped, by my left side because it helped me turn through it. Then I put it in my back right pocket, and then I just recently decided to put kind of like hug my right arm to my chest with my left hand. So my left hand is on kind of right above my elbow now, kind of like near my bicep.
Okay.
And I find that allows me to hit longer shots easier because I can just kind of, pin it to my body and just turn really hard.
Yeah.
Which that was the problem I had with it before. And sometimes under pressure too, when you just have, when you're just relying on one arm, it can be tough.
Well, I remember. So I happened to be down with Austin when he top 10 at Puerto Rico, and on that fourth round, 18th hole, you used two.
I did, yeah. Yeah, well, you have to sometimes. You have to. And
I
the
always
thing is,
remember that he's chipping one-handed all week, and then when it really came down to it, he used two.
yeah, it's true. It's true. And the thing is, like, the shot didn't turn out good, but I actually hit it just the way I wanted.
Yeah.
Like
Well,
on 18. I made the putt, but it was like a 20-something footer. But anyways, yeah.
I think that's a really good question. So the day before that round, after your third round, put up a good number. You knew top 10 got you into the Honda. So that was clearly the goal. Winning was, you needed just like a 61 to win. So that wasn't that wasn't the goal. So we sat at lunch and we were trying to do the math to figure out what score you needed tomorrow for a top 10. Is that something you would typically do before you start a round? Or are you typically going in with no expectations, completely process goal? Like, which one are you leaning towards, or does it depend on the situation?
I have to say that, and even I've thought about that very thing quite a bit in my time off. Mm-hmm. I have not found a system in terms of that mindset that I'm satisfied with. I've had times where I've had a number in mind. I've had times where I've had, a process percentage in mind. At the end of the day, I always would say I'd gear more towards the process percentage because at the end of the day, if you can only control the input, and if you're doing everything you can to make the right decisions, to follow your routine and commit to the shots, I mean, that's all you can really control. So I would say that as of right now, I'm more happy with just focusing on process percentage. Mm-hmm. But there is something to be said about verbalizing a number. I mean, that I know Tiger does it, and a lot of great players, when they go into rounds, they have an idea of what number. Like Brooks Koepka, I mean, he'll verbalize what he wants to do, and he could be playing terrible golf, and he could verbalize a 65 and shoot 65 that day. Like, it works for certain guys, and it's worked for me too. But when I think the best example of why I don't go by that is because when I kind of was learning how to do Monday qualifiers, which was something I was not good at when I first attempted them, I would get really stressed, and then I would try to press too hard, and I would turn it into, this big ordeal. And my worst golf came out. And when I got through the Mondays, I didn't have a number, but you kind of know what you need to do going into the round. I mean, it's good to think about.
You need a 65 on the tee, the first tee before you.
Yeah, you need a good round. But the thing that's interesting about it is when you're playing a Monday or when you're playing, a 4-round tournament. I mean, at the end of the day, your goal is to shoot the lowest score you can shoot. So why would it, be any different for a 1-day event versus a 4-day event, because it really should be the same goal every day. But I
And
think,
that's a good thing to remember for the guys on par fives who are like, I'll lay up because it's a par five, but try to go for it because it's a par four. Like, it doesn't matter what the
yeah,
par is. Like, the goal is just lowest
yeah,
score.
exactly. Yeah. Whatever you can do to get the ball in the hole as quickly as possible, that's the goal, right? So, um, I th yeah, just to use like someone as an example, like Patrick Reed, when he got on tour from all those Mondays and then played his way in, like, I know he didn't play practice rounds and he just showed up and just tried to shoot like 62 every time.
Mhm.
And he's a rare example of someone that just had the mental ability to just not care what other people think and just really go after what his vision was. But there is something to be said for saying, I'm going to do this today. When you go out to, if your goal is to just have good processes and you're not mindful about, the end result, you'll have great rounds, but at the end of the day, you're trying, like, if you're passionate about the game, you want great results, you want a number to chase, so that's a tough one. I haven't found anything I'm really that satisfied with in
Well,
regards to that.
I found because I used to try to be more process oriented, but the problem that I had with that is then it was almost like I wasn't satisfied, but I was okay with pars. Whereas
Yep.
like sometimes you get on a course, and this would be like your version of a Monday when I was just playing AM stuff or other pro stuff, was like sometimes you're on an easy golf course and 72 is not going to cut it.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
you need to kind of be able to do something to shift into the next gear. And I
yep.
think that sometimes you have to have a number in your head in order to do that.
Yeah, you have to create some sort of expectation. But obviously when you're playing an easy course and you feel like 68's par and you're 3 over through 5, then you get stressed, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh. But you often find that when you do 3 over through 5, you do shoot like 7 under on, the last 13 holes.
Well,
You know,
okay,
I
you, maybe not everyone else, but yeah.
well, no, but it's true. I mean, there's something about getting off to a bad start that can just fire you up and get you in a different mindset. Sometimes when you start off around, you're timid and you're playing more to avoid mistakes than you are to really attack the course.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I always found if you made like a
so
6 foot breaker for bogey on the first, that was always going to be a good round somehow.
yeah, well, there is something to say about that because that's frantic. You just saved, like, when you have a 6 footer for bogey on the first, that's like a frantic state of mind you're in.
Yeah.
So you can kind of like, exhale and relax after that.
All right. So I got a few, so a bunch of questions, but I've noticed that there's kind of a trend in asking about thoughts over the ball. Are like what's your kind of policy on swing thoughts? And then what percent energy are you trying to put into stock swings on the course?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Where your eyes are, um, I've tinkered with whether I focus on a dimple or if I focus on, a certain point that I want to hit the ball. That doesn't work for me. It's kind of a vague blur of the ball. I'm not trying. I'm just trying.
Do you have like a technical thought at all? Or is it
Yeah, yeah.
completely, yeah,
So I'm just starting with the eyes. Like when I'm
yeah.
looking over the ball, a lot of people, you know, for example, like if you wanted to hit a fade, one way to look at the ball is looking at the outside of the ball, trying to hit the outside of the ball, come across it. And I've tinkered with that, and that works to a certain extent, but that to me is just getting a little bit too fancy. I'd rather focus on what I'm doing with my setup rather than how I'm trying to hit the ball.
Mm.
Um, but in terms of the swing thoughts, I never have more than two. I always have swing thoughts though. I over the ball, my main focus is, inhale when I put the club behind the ball, exhale down, making sure the tension is released kind of more from my upper body down into a solid base. Like think like when you're in the sand, you have that solid base and you're just like, and there when you get stressed, you tend to, get a lot of tension in your upper body and then you go off balance because you get quick. And then when you bring the tension to your head, your head's moving now because the stability is not in your core and in your base. It's now up top. And so that messes up your swing altogether. But the swing thought for me, one thing that I have is I think, when I was playing in 2020, the one I had pretty much all year was head back and down and in posture. And that was it.
Good ones. Simple, not
Simple.
Overly technical.
No.
Really good ones. Yeah.
You need a good, yeah. And I don't think it's good to be tinkering with the different swing thoughts. I think you're always going to have your tendencies, and you're always going to go to those when you're stressed. And so for me, my tendency is my head gets out ahead and I just hit blocks. But when I kind of can keep my head back and down, it helps me deliver the club from the inside, but have square shoulders and
kind of that tiger move.
Yeah, try to have that. And so many teachers today are teaching the opposite of that, and that's my biggest pet peeve. They're teaching you to swing like a 25 handicap.
That's what me and Ben talk about when we hop on Zooms nowadays.
That's what I talk to Mike Bender about. I'm like, they're literally teaching people to hit like slices with their eye line at the eye line is at the target at impact. I don't know how anyone look, you have like 3 people in the history of golf that have hit it while doing that. So
Duval.
Yeah, Duval, Sorenstam, and Stenson to a certain extent. Yeah. And then outside of that, I mean, you look at the top 20 ball strikers in the world, none of them do that. So why are all these coaches teaching that? It makes no sense. But
so what percent
what percentage of
energy are you putting? I know Mike has always told me 80, 100% commitment, 80% effort.
I would say it's about 80. It's not like a conscious 80, but it's 80. I would say drivers might be more, but it's not like I don't make a conscious effort to make it more. But I just feel like for whatever reason, if you're trying to lay back with driver, your club face awareness isn't as good. If you have that same consistent, rapid firing every time, your timing's just better. And so I would say it's probably more. It's probably like 90 with driver.
Yeah. What are you doing? Are you looking at or thinking about your start line or the target or shape? There's kind of 3 options there.
Yeah. I mean, behind the ball, I'm thinking of the start line and finish line. Mm-hmm. Over the ball, I just set up for the shot and then focus on my swing. I'm not thinking of, I'm going to hit the draw. I just set, if I have to hit a 15-yard draw with a 7-iron, I mean, I set the club head a little bit closed, more towards the flag, and then I'll set my feet. All right, when I say closed, left, rather than right. Because I think it gets confusing. People say open and closed because it can be different with the face versus your feet. And my feet will be right, and I'll just kind of swing the same way I would swing on my stock shot, but with just a modified setup.
I like that.
Simple.
I like that a lot. That goes back to like the very beginning, right? Keeping it as simple as possible, changing as few variables as possible, and keeping it easy. Yeah.
Yeah, it keeps it simple.
There's a few questions regarding nerves.
Yeah.
Both maybe how you deal with them. Well, let's start with where do you feel them the most? Do you feel them the most when you're playing well and you're in contention, or when you're not playing so well and like you're trying to find it?
I think my nerves are the most when I'm not playing well and I'm not even at the course yet. I saw Scottie Scheffler said that, before the round he was crying, he was so nervous, and then once he got to the course, a lot of his worries just went away. Mm-hmm. And I can relate to that, because I think once you're physically on site and you're going through your routine, the routine is really what, best gets you to focus on what matters rather than, the what ifs, and gets you out of stress. I really think that's it. You got to have a routine. And once you have established a routine and it's just second nature to you, that kind of just takes over when you're most nervous, and can just give you a sense of being at home almost.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it any better. What is the biggest change from maybe the guy who's scratch to the guy who's competing now, whether it's high level amateur or at the pro level? Like, what's when you play with a scratch golfer, which I think you do at a fair rate, whether it's at the club or
Yeah,
wherever, what
yeah,
separates you who's probably, I mean, if you kept a true handicap and they actually made sense, probably like a +6.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
where are those 6 shots coming from?
I think a lot of what we've talked about,
The little
and
things just
under
kind of all adding up.
the little things adding up. And I think that there's a difference in just the skill, a lot of some skills with, a scratch and a +6, where the scratch just will hit those 2, 3 shots during the round that you don't see the top players hit, and when you have those in play, it's hard to it's just hard to compete at a higher level. If you hit those 2 pull hooks, out of bounds or whatever it might be. But it's pretty much all we've talked about. The process, the way you manage your game on the course, and the way you practice, and the skills you develop through your productive practices. That's the biggest thing.
Absolutely. So there's not a whole lot of technical questions, but there's one kind of topic that I think some people would be really interested to hear. And it's a question I get a lot too. In transition, what do you feel, and this is different for everyone, but what do you feel is kind of starting the move down? A lot of my more athletic guys spin out.
Yeah,
And so what are you, especially maybe when you're trying to find a tempo, find a rhythm?
yeah. I always have a tendency of getting quick with my upper body in transition, so I tend to focus almost on my, maintaining that back to the target, so to speak, while getting the hands working towards the ball,
Mhm.
while shallowing the club and, kicking, my hips through,
The move.
opening them up, the move. Yeah, the move.
For those who
Exactly.
don't
I
know
mean,
what we're
that's it.
talking about, yeah, we used to sit in our kitchen and have like hour-long just like conversations on the move. But it's Ben Hogan's thing, where I mean he did it probably better than anybody, especially the guy with a longer swing, where he was just really patient in
Yeah.
transition and everything
Yeah, it's a
happened out
YouTube
first.
video. It's a 1 minute long YouTube video of him talking about the transition. It's
Mhm.
great.
Yeah. No, I think that one's really good. Would you, especially maybe under the gun, let's say coming up 18 and you're in contention, would you rather have maybe a 80-yard wedge shot where you're trying to find it or a full stock swing?
Mm. I will say that I think mentally I would probably be more comfortable with stock. Um, and one thing that's interesting too, if you watch the players, you notice how many of those guys just screw up the drop zone there. They hit, the from the tee shot, it's about 135 yards, and if they hit in the water, they then drop from the drop zone. I don't know how long it is, maybe 70 yards or
Like
so.
70 to
And
80, depending on pin.
yeah, and so they'll have a 70-yard shot after being frazzled, having missed the green, and now they're going to make, bogey at best, most likely double. And they have to kind of finesse something with the crowd watching, and it's just stressful. It's a stressful situation, and you'll see some of the best guys in the world hit some horrible shots from there. I saw Justin Rose hit one of the worst wedge shots I've ever seen in my life on that. Did you see that this year?
Yeah,
He
that one comes to mind too. Yeah.
he carried the green and by 20 yards and missed it 15 yards left of
Yeah.
the pin with a 70-yard wedge. So there's something. I mean, that was just a bad swing, but like you just see, and I think there is something to be said for, a stock number that you like, or more of a full swing
The
shot.
par fives at Augusta really come to mind too.
Hmm.
Maybe 15, where the guys lay up and it's not a perfect lie and it's 70
Yeah,
yards and they're trying to control the
yeah,
spin and there's just too much going on and you see guys miss the green from there.
yeah. You'd rather have, a full swing sand wedge off the downslope where you create a lot more spin
Mhm.
and control the carry number rather than Yeah, that 70-yard shot that off the downslope comes into that green too low and skips kind of off the back fringe. You saw a lot of that this year.
So Bill asked a good question, kind of how are you balancing maybe the understanding that there is a sort of a random shot pattern, decade principle, with the fact that you're trying to get the proximity as tight as possible?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One thing that it kind of depends on the circumstance, but I'll look to where the misses are, but also to where the easier putts are. So if you just if you're hitting your wedges well, and you just practice well, and your distances are good, and your spin rates are good, and your ball flight's consistent. Let's just say you have an 80-yard shot, and the pin's in the front, but you have, you're probably about 10 to 15 feet below the hole that you can hit it to. Or if you hit it past the hole, it might be a 10-footer, but it could be breaking 4 feet or whatever. I am mindful of, I'd rather have a 15-footer kind of straight up the hill than an 11-footer that breaks 5 feet. So proximity is important, but where the pin is, and when you play more competitive events, whether it's amateur golf or professional golf, you get so many pins that are within 7 paces of an edge. And what's great about Decade is it doesn't tell you to just go at every pin. If you go at every pin on a Korn Ferry Tour, you'll have some rounds that you shoot really low, but over the course of the year, you're going to lose so many strokes attacking pins.
So it sounds like even though you don't have the Decade numbers in your head, you're more or less doing the same thing.
Yeah,
where you're shifting your dispersion in the correct direction, while maybe leaving your dispersion pattern somewhere over the hole.
Yes, yeah. It's all circumstantial, but the most important thing is where's the miss, but also what leave would be the best on the green, especially with the scoring clubs. Because if you have command over the scoring clubs, the numbers don't lie. You're going to make more kind of straight uphill 10-footers than you are 15-foot sliders, or 8-foot sliders. So I'm mindful of that too.
So everyone on the call, maybe I just started with them, maybe they've been around for a while. A question that's come up is kind of, what is a block? Can you explain maybe that block practice a little bit more?
Yeah, so for me, my block practice is I have my alignment rods down. I'm still mindful of the mechanical work I just put in, and I'm trying to create my desired stock shot while not really focusing so much on the outcome of the shot during the block practice, but by taking what I just tried to teach myself with the mechanical feels, the mechanical drills, and doing that in the block. My caddy John and I do one of the best learning processes you can have in a short amount of time. Let's just say you played 18 holes and you played okay, and you're just exhausted and you need to go to the range, but you just want 10 minutes. One thing that we'll do is we'll do like 3 8-iron swings that are just mechanics, like focusing so much on a mechanical drill. Then we'll do 3 8-iron swings that are just a stock shot without really thinking about the result, but implementing the feel of that. And then 3 shots that are just like tournament, full routine on course. And then we'll go from that 3-3-3 to the 1-1-1. And then where you just do just mechanics focused block, and then tournament focused full routine. And so you're just like bleeding through that feedback loop of what feels right to create the move you desire, creating the move you desire, but not really getting too stressed about the outcome, and then challenging yourself with that shot at the end.
Yeah, and I love that. I think you inadvertently asked a question that's come up a couple of times, which is, some of these guys are making massive technical changes. And so how do you take that and facilitate that from the range where maybe you're seeing it pay off, to the golf course. I
Yeah,
think right there is a brilliant
that
way
drill
to
that
do
drill
it.
is huge.
Yeah.
That drill is huge. That's it. And then one thing that I've done that has worked well is when you get on course, one thing you can do to eliminate variables, especially off the tee, is if you're just focusing on your move, be easy on yourself and just set the alignment rods down on the course. Oh wait, hold on. Hello?
Yep,
Yeah,
you're
sorry
back.
about that.
You're good.
Set the alignment rods down on the tee and then focus on your move.
Hmm.
Um, because one, you're ingraining the good habits of proper alignment. So you're doing the move the right way. So let's just say you're trying to get more in and out. A lot of people would just align too far right and then feel like, oh, well, I'm swinging more in and out when they're really swinging the same way. It's just that they've changed their shoulder line and their foot line. I think that's helpful. But yeah, that taking it from the range to the course really, I think, comes from productive practice, like we've talked about, just those four different stages of practice. And then, forcing yourself in uncomfortable situations, compete as much as possible and have that feedback loop of competition, evaluating what you did during the competition, putting that practice plan in place, implementing the practice plan, and just doing that over and over again. That's what was so great about us living in Lake Mary, having Mike Bender's Academy, was you could go play a mini tour event any day of the week, and you could, you play 18 holes, you evaluate how you did, and you could go to the academy and work on anything you needed to work on as well as you could all day, and then in 2 days you could go compete again, or the next day you could go compete again. It's just like this feedback loop of, positive reinforcement and productivity, and it's great.
Well, and even that on a lot smaller scale is, instead of competing being 18 holes in a money game, it's doing this drill and holding yourself
Yeah,
to, a score in your head of what that is.
yeah,
Maybe you have two targets on the range and you're going to hit 5 balls and see if you can get 3 of them in. I mean, that's
yeah.
competing,
Oh
and,
yeah, I will
and
say.
that's a great way too.
Yes, what you kind of emphasize the measurable. That's one thing I've kind of forgot to mention. So when I put my practice plan in place and I have all my drills,
Mm-hmm.
I, while I'm practicing, I measure my performance and I, document what the performance would be. So let's just say I'm doing the 5T drill of putting. Um, I time how long it takes for me to complete the drill. Um, or if I'm doing, any drill, if there's any way of measuring it, whether it's time focused or outcome focused, I measure it and I document it, and it's cool because you can kind of see your consistent improvement. Or when you look back on your practices, you forget, oh, I was doing that drill for 2 months, at the beginning of the year, and I really like that drill, and for some reason I just haven't been doing that drill anymore. So I think a lot of the time you have things that work, and in the process of trying to get better, you move away from the things that work. And sometimes you got to keep it really simple and boring, but make it fun, as fun as you can.
Yeah, 100%. Chris Cott, how are you moving on from a bad shot? Like, I mean, I saw this one firsthand at Puerto Rico. I forget, second round, maybe 10th hole or something. You put one left in the garbage and had to like drop in a
Yeah,
really bad spot. And this is a point where it mattered, like maybe more than
yeah,
ever. This was the worst shot that I ever saw you hit at a point that mattered this much.
yeah, yeah. You do. You just. I've had a lot of moments like that where you don't really, maybe you lost focus on one swing or made a bad decision, or sometimes you just make a bad swing. That's going to happen. Um, Recovering. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to accept the outcome and accept the challenge of the next shot. You know, accepting it, accept the challenge, and then implement your routine. Fall back to your training and trust your training, and that's why you have to practice well. If you don't put the work in, you're not going to have the confidence to recover from a bad shot. Um, so it really just goes back to having a sound routine on the course, a consistent sound routine, as well as, productive practice. measurable practice, and gain the confidence from that. There are really no secrets of, of recovering from a bad shot. Like some days you're gonna hit a lot of bad shots. It's just the way it is, The one thing that you don't do when you hit a bad shot is like lash out because you want other people to know that you hit a bad shot. You know what I mean? Sometimes when we're trying to impress someone or we're trying to, save face, you overreact to a bad shot kind of to let the other people know, like, oh, I don't normally do this type of thing. There's no reason to do that, especially when you play with the better the guys you play with, those guys understand better than anybody that you just can hit some bad shots.
Yeah.
So don't be self-conscious about it and just keep going and trust your training and your routine.
Well, I think you'd probably agree with this. It's generally the inverse, where it's the better the player is the one that acts the least surprised when they hit a really bad shot.
Yeah. Think about Dustin Johnson.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy is, I mean, maybe the best player of the last 15 years, one of them at least. And you almost can't tell the difference in his body language between when he's winning, 3 to 5 times a year or when, he struggles.
Mm-hmm.
So that's I think that's the key. And I think that the most impressive players, they get angry with themselves, but they have enough confidence and assurance that they're going to succeed they don't base their whole life's worth, on a few bad swings one day,
So I think that leads into this question really well. The guys that quote unquote make it, whether it's PGA Tour, whatever, everyone's good, right? I mean, you and I in Florida have seen everyone's good. Are they the outliers? Like they're that much better than everyone else? Or are they the ones that are, quote, in the question, dumb enough to just keep going?
Yeah, I think it's tough because, we've talked a lot about a lot of thoughts, right? A lot of things that go into your practice, into your routine, into on-course performance. But a lot of the guys that make it, they've developed their way of playing golf. They know how they play golf, and they just keep playing until they make it, right? As you said. And it's really tough to predict who's going to make it. You can tell with certain players just based on pure talent or willpower that they're going to play. But you get a lot of guys that you play with on the mini tours or, whatever, Korn Ferry, that don't seem that impressive, who make it and stay out on the PGA Tour for 10, 20 years. And you just never really know. And that's the funny thing about it.
Well, that's a conversation we've had a lot is, I'll text you and I'll just be like, I thought this guy was can't miss, like based on whether I played with him or based on his results working up. Like I thought this guy was can't miss. And now he's playing moonlight tours, or like whatever, the smallest, he's paying to like, he doesn't have any.
Yeah.
And then there's guys that it's shocking where you're like, I've played with him. He's not that good. And now he's on tour.
Yeah. And you also have to remember and keep things in perspective that it's a marathon, right? There are guys that will catch fire and in your mind you feel like, oh my God, they're one of the best in the world. Like they've made it, but they might not be there 3 years from now or, things change. But there are guys that you do play with that you just know are going to do it. And, I've been telling people a lot recently just because what he's been doing. But my, senior year of high school, I played quite a bit of golf with Scottie Scheffler. And I didn't know there wasn't really a measurable element rather than just pure score that made me think he was the best. But he really was the best in our grad class by quite a bit. And if you look at his stats now, he drives it pretty far. He's bottom, I think he's 145 in driving accuracy, but his strokes gained approach is solid, his chipping solid, his putting solid. And if you have, 3 of those categories in the top 50 or in the top 25 on the PGA Tour, you're going to be winning a lot of golf tournaments, or at least be getting top tens, because you don't have to do everything perfect relative to the field. But, you know, as I think you and I have talked about this, and I know Ben emphasizes this a lot, as you said, like, good ball striking gets you on tour, but what differentiates you is, like, the best guys have like one or two things that they do exceptionally well.
Well, and Ben calls it your superpower. Like,
Yeah,
you know,
your superpower.
and with you, like, it's probably driving the golf ball. I mean, am I
Yeah.
right? Like, I would say that's very clearly in my mind what your superpower is. And you're the guy who still hits the most drivers on the range when you practice, at least in my opinion. So,
Yeah.
like, that's, you know, you have to not only have your superpower, but keep it and own it and get better at it. Like, so it's not always practicing just what you're worst at.
Yes, and I think the greatest superpower in golf is making an ugly round something with a 6 in front of it when you're done. And I think that's what I think that's what I noticed when I played with him in high school was, you watch the way he follows through on half of his shots and you're like, what the heck was that? You know, it looks terrible. And he's just sloppy a lot of the time off the tee, but then you finish the round and you add up the score and he shot 67. You're like, where did that
like
come from?
In 2015.
Yeah, when you add up the score, he just comes in with a lower score. And so that's probably the greatest superpower in golf is, you know, the guys that can turn an ugly ball striking day into a subpar round on a tour course. You know,
yeah. I remember there was one round you played with Scottie in high school, and you just texted, as soon as it was over, you texted me and you were just like, Scottie Scheffler's the best putter I've ever seen. Like, it probably wasn't even like, you know, that statistically probably isn't even true, but that day he needed it to get his 68, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, when you watch, I'm sure you've seen this video of Tiger being interviewed when he's a teenager. And he said, you know, when he's asked what makes him so good, he says his competitiveness. When I need to make a putt, I make a putt. When I need to when I need to hit the green, I hit the green. When I need to make birdie, I make birdie.
Willing the ball in the hole instead of hitting it.
There's something to the willing it. They're going to be, I would say the vast majority of days, your willpower is not going to get the ball in the hole, because you're going to have to develop your skills. Like, but there is that extra, you know, maybe 5% of the game that is willpower, and that 5% over the course of a year might make a guy, might make a guy make the FedEx Cup Tour Championship versus, you know, be a top 100 player,
or keep a card and rather than lose the card, and then you build off of it. Got two really good questions involving equipment. Zach's kind of just wants to know what are your what's currently in the bag, and what's your favorite stuff.
I love the TaylorMade equipment. I like the block bias of the woods. I've always liked missing the ball right, and seemingly every driver they put out has had a block bias, with the exception of the Sim 2 last year. I think that was probably the first time that when you set it down, it looked like it would be more of a draw or more of a left bias. So I like a right bias with the woods, and through the bag. I've played the same shafts since I was 15. You know, the X100 4-issue, steel shafts. That's just kind of the classic shaft. I think Tiger's used that since he was 13. And then the swing weights, you know, finding a swing weight that's comfortable. I like more weight towards the end of the club. I like feeling the face more. So I have D6 irons, D5 fairway woods, D4 driver, D7 wedges. And I don't like tinkering a lot. I have shifted driver shafts a few times. The one I have in the bag now just allows me to feel the face and feel a little bit more whip in the shaft. I was playing a really boardy shaft that I liked because I felt like it was impossible to miss left. But I just didn't feel that solid contact a lot of the time for whatever reason, and I don't think it was really suited for how I was swinging the club. So I'll shift driver shafts, but once you find a good driver shaft, occasionally when a new head comes out and you have to switch to the new head, or your old head breaks, so you need a new head. The most important thing is to make sure that if once you get a new head, that the grams of the head is the same weighting. Because a lot of people don't realize, these club manufacturers do not produce these things as consistently as you would think. And so even being out on tour, you have to triple check what they give you. I've had a bunch of situations where I, had the exact same shaft in the club, but the swing weight has shifted based on a new head being a few grams lighter, a few grams heavier. And that makes a huge difference with your club face awareness at impact, going into impact. So I'd say find weightings that you trust, find an iron shaft that you can play forever, and don't tinker, especially as you know, improve as a player, and you might get, club companies offering you discounts or free equipment. Don't get too excited and just try everything. Stick with what works. And the latest and the great and the sexiest isn't always the best. Look, Scottie Scheffler just had his three. He just changed his 3-wood for the first time in like 10 years a couple weeks ago.
He was still using the Nike one, wasn't he?
Yeah, I was using the old Nike. I think Denny McCarthy who's on the PGA Tour, I think he still uses that Nike 3-wood too. Mm-hmm. And you've seen a lot of guys kind of forego club contracts or because they just want to play what they're used to or what they know works for them. And the club contracts are changing to, some do 14, but a lot of companies because of the demand of the players, starting to be more lenient with them using more clubs that aren't necessarily just their brand, because they understand that the players find something they like, and they, you don't, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So just keep it simple.
A couple specific ones. What are your wedge shafts? I think that's always a question that I get too. Is wedge shafts match the irons? Are they different?
I haven't tinkered much with them. I have S4s, which are just slightly lighter, whippier shafts than the X1s, but they're very similar.
And then what golf balls in the bag?
The TP5 regular. That was a huge learning curve for me playing Korn Ferry. I always played the X ball, which when you play, mini tours in Central Florida, you get a lot of soft greens. That X ball goes a little farther off the tee, but you don't notice how much of a difference having spin into firm greens makes until you landed on the green and on 16 holes that only hit 9 greens. And so I had to shift away from the firm ball to something just with a little bit more spin.
And then with regarding club fitting, do you think it's, I have a stance on this, so I'm curious to hear what you say. Do you think it's as important as the fitters make you think, or do you think that the best player is still gonna play well?
Yeah, I mean, well, they're salesmen, right? So they have their incentives of making you feel significantly more confident in the numbers that you're producing. But I've only I learned my lesson once on this. Is you obviously need your right lie angles. You need the weights that fit you comfortably. As I talked about, kind of the club face awareness and what you prefer. Whether it's a lighter swing weight or a heavier swing weight. And you want a shaft that, roughly matches your swing speed. But everything after that is personal preference. And just because they're able to juice your numbers on the TrackMan, showing that you're hitting your 7-iron 190 instead of 175, that doesn't mean anything, especially on the course. Like, I learned that lesson once when I first switched to TaylorMade. I, had, I think, a degree or two stronger and the cavity back just had a little more pop to it, and they fitted me into Project X shaft, which on the system, the TrackMan system was saying I was hitting everything 5 to 10 yards longer, and I was like, oh well, that's clearly better. But then once I got on the course, my dispersion and carry was dramatically worse. Instead of a 7-iron being the difference between a good shot and a bad shot being 10 yards, it was now 20 yards. And then also my ball flight was different. I was starting to hit it higher with less spin, because that's kind of what they want you to do to create more distance. But just you don't need, it's personal preference, especially your ball flight. Like some guys like seeing a low spinny shot, some guys like seeing kind of a high ball. You don't want them to tell you how you need to be playing golf. You have to use your own judgment and understand your game and what you prefer, and then mix that with the data you're getting, as well as the basics of club fitting, which are lofts, lies, and even grip. Grip is a huge thing. That's the toughest thing for me. When I first started playing competitive golf, and I get nervous in the summer when it's 100 degrees in Florida, I learned that I needed a different grip. I had the old Tour Velvet, and my hands would slide off that, and I would top shots and chunk shots just because I didn't have any confidence in holding onto the club. So yeah, but there's no best grip. It's just what you feel comfortable with.
Yeah, got a couple someone to ask. I got two more kind of equipment stuff. What wedge lofts do you carry, and how do you decide, like, if you have a centered pin, which wedge you're gonna hit when maybe you have 2 or 3 shots that distance is correct?
Yeah, it's good to have a lot of different shots with your wedges. My lofts I have 47. 47 with I think 8 bounce on my pitching wedge, and then I have a 53 degree that is a high bounce. I think it's 12 or 13 bounce, and then I have a lower bounce lob wedge. That's a change for me. I used to keep everything consistent. Used to have 53 with like 9, and then a 59 with 9. But now I have a 59 with I think about 7. But it's a different grind, and it enables me to have the club sit more flat any way I really put it down on the ground. I think that most guys on tour will have, if they have 4 wedges or 3 wedges, they definitely have at least 1 wedge with higher bounce, 1 wedge with lower bounce, or depending on the conditions of the course, they might switch it. I've always had 3 wedges. I practice a lot of different shots with them. So when I say different shots, it's really more just different numbers. I know what I need to do to hit my pitching wedge 140, and I know what I need to do to hit my pitching wedge 80. So that's why I only have 3. My 53 degree is my trusty one around the greens. That's like I'll hit. I mean, obviously there's certain situations, where you can't hit it, but if it's a straightforward shot and I can land it on the first third of the green, it's going to be the 53 degree.
Well, I would say that you, especially playing with you, like, you definitely land the ball and run it on those kind of hit shots more often, even than most players who know that that's the shot they're supposed to play. I mean, I'd say you're pretty by the book there, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. A lot of coaches will tell you to land it, within the first, 2 paces of the green. I think obviously it depends on the shape of the green, but landing it on the first third of the green is really kind of more, you want to give yourself a little bit more room, because if you're trying to land on the first couple paces, if you land it short in the fringe, it might be into the grain and it might not even get on the green. You want to give yourself a little bit more, I guess, forgiveness.
Yeah,
so
I really like that too. Someone said, "Are you actually 6'5", or is this like freshman basketball when 6'1" became, or 5'7" became 6'1"?
No, I'm actually 6'5 and a half.
Yeah, I would say I'm 6'1", and Austin, I look up. I look up when we're having a conversation.
Yeah.
Not
I
not
like
really
6'5".
Yeah.
6'6", I don't know. 6'6" starts to get too tall, so I just go by 6'5".
Do you think that influences the way that you, I know with full swing, it just increases distance. So let's start there. Someone asked, what is like a stock driver um, number distance?
Yeah. So stock driver, just the regular draw driver, is about a 300-yard carry.
Mhm.
Um, I I have two shots I hit with driver, that I can hit that I hit almost every time. I have that 300 high draw, and then I have what I call the bunt cut, which I implemented a couple years ago. Mostly because I'm not good with three woods. That's always been a weakness to my game, and I've never liked them off the tee. So I needed to create like something that, depending on how much it rolls out, something that can go about 250 to 270 or 280. In that 250 to 280 range, that can just be a fairway finder. And the bunt cut shot for me is I choke up almost down to the graphite. I tee the ball low. I aim my feet left with the club face open to my feet, and my weight is I have less tilt, and I'm a little bit more on my left side. And I just stay there, and I do about a 3/4 swing with the driver, but it's full speed 3/4. It's not like I'm trying to like, ease up into it. And I just hold it off, and it probably launches at about 6 or 7 degrees and curves 10 yards. And it has become the most reliable shot in my bag. I can go anywhere and play with that.
I like that one a lot.
That's
Um,
great.
Training aids. I know you use a swing guide like all the time still.
Yeah.
Are there other things that you'll kind of fall back on?
Just a shaft in the ground for my right ear, for my head. I mean, if you can keep your head consistently in the same position throughout the swing, I mean, you just turn around and stay in your posture, you're going to be on plane pretty well, unless you're
Now,
doing something weird with your hinges.
I would add the caveat here that the two players that I know have used the plain board the
Oh
most
yeah.
are Zach Johnson and Austin.
Oh yeah. The plane board is, yeah. I do the portable plane board. I don't have one here in Tampa, but um, once you've used the plane board for a certain amount of time, you won't deviate too much from it. You'll when I deviate from the plane, it's usually because of the way I hinge the club rather than the movement of my body.
Mhm.
Um, but the plane board is the best. I mean, the Megsa is obviously great too. Um,
And that's stuff that,
but
obviously people don't just always have at their disposal. So,
yeah,
getting
that's
creative in how you implement those concepts is kind of, what I see as my job around here.
yeah, exactly. Portable plane board, noodle,
Hmm.
with the shaft in the ground on the right ear. I mean, those two are great starting points. I mean, if you just had those two, and those are things that you can bring with you on the road while you travel and compete too. So those two are, over the course of the year, all you really need. And then outside of that, you can get creative with different moves. But yeah, swing guide, obviously, great as well.
So I would say, Austin, that you are the player that I've seen the most ever. You might hit balls for an hour, and I'll look over and you've spent 30 or 40 minutes going at like 20% speed or pausing at different positions and kind of
Yeah.
executing a half hit and hold while you're working on things. Can you kind of maybe talk through what you're feeling when you do that? Because when I work with players, oftentimes we'll work on something and they'll go try to implement it at 100% speed, and then
Yeah.
maybe doesn't work. Whereas if we kind of
Yeah.
went 10%, 20% and worked the way up with that, that might be preferable.
Yeah. And I've talked to Ben about this recently. He likes more full speed implementation of like a feel because it's more realistic, like with your full swing. And I agree with that. I think that but I think there's something to be said for that. But I feel like that's more at the end of the work rather than throughout the entire implementation of a new swing move. Um, for me, I'm trying to deliver it on plane with less space rotation and rotate around my body and kind of have more of a hold off finish, like more like what you would see Fleetwood, have. And that's not a natural move, especially as a junior golfer. When you're really flexible and you're moving all over the place, you finish with the club like wrapped around. I think of like
the Michelle Wee
when Michelle Wee, yeah. Like that's how junior golfers finished, and it's great because you're just trying to get as much speed as you can get. But to have the ultimate club face control and ultimately like control over the shot. For me, the working with the slow speed is just understanding that 1 + 1 = 2. Like I'm gonna exaggerate the move that I'm trying to create at a slow pace, and then kind of work it up to where I can comfortably do it with full speed. It's not something that I think everyone needs to do, but for me, it helps it helps ease me into the move and just kind of create those new patterns, I guess.
Yeah. All right. I think we've probably taken up enough of your time. I got one last question. It's a good one. Someone saw the highlight on 16 at Puerto Rico. So I'll just kind of set the stage, and then the question is just how excited were you? But essentially, we knew Austen just missed a birdie putt on a par 5, a pretty short birdie putt on a par 5, and we knew that he needed to go 3 under in the last 3 essentially to have a chance at top 10ing. That was kind of the goal. And 16 tucked pin over the bunker, just dunked it.
Yeah, that's just it was just a golf experience. I mean, it's just a weird game. I wasn't trying to even go at the pin. I was aimed 8 yards right of the target, and I wasn't even trying to carry it pin high, because if my ball didn't land in the hole, it was going to be over the green, maybe in the hazard. You can't really tell that like looking at it on TV, but yeah, it was a silly shot. I just aimed towards the middle of the green and I pulled it, and obviously when you pull it, the ball tends to go farther, and it went in the hole. And that round was such an emotional roller coaster up until that point, because I put myself in the position I need. Like I built that week up to really want it to. I just had a good feeling that if I followed my process, that I have a good week and maybe get a top 10. And I did everything I needed to give myself the opportunity to. And then going into that par 3, I was pretty much defeated. I felt like I can still have a great finish and make a good check this week, but I had pretty much given up on it at that point. I was like, okay, this is it. Let's get in the house the best score we can, but it looks like the top 10 isn't going to happen. And then that went in the hole. I mean, it was
and it was windy enough that you couldn't see the flag because it was over the bunker. And it was windy enough that you couldn't even hear it hit the flag. And I was standing at a point near the green, but I couldn't see the hole either. So we were relying on my mom,
the cameraman,
by the green, the cameraman, to kind of relay the message to me, to relay the message to you that even went in.
Yeah, it was. You guys are the best for being there, because one thing that they added audio into.
Yeah, they added audio to the PGA thing, because there
was no one there.
There were 3 or 4 spectators there, and they added audio to the highlight tape for ESPN and PGA Tour, which is a funny one. But very much also kind of like a job's not done mentality, because there were still 2 more holes. 17 was demanding, very demanding tee shot on 17, and then a somewhat gettable par 5 on 18. And so it was,
so you still got to finish it off. That John, my caddy, really emphasized after the hole-in-one, like getting clear on what we were trying to do on the tee shot on 17. I think it's very common in golf after an extraordinary shot or a couple birdies to get complacent and to just have a lack of focus on the next tee shot, and so that we emphasize that. And I gave myself a great look at birdie on that hole. I missed like a 9 or 10 footer for birdie. But yeah, that you just gotta, at the end of the day, no matter what happens, you gotta get clear on the next shot and follow your routine.
Well, and I think that whether it's a high or a low, being able to
Yeah, exactly.
bring it back down to neutral, because they're actually a lot more similar than like you might think, whether you've just made a
Yeah,
quad or, a double eagle, like your body
yeah,
treats it the same.
yeah. And you'll see, I think that that's a skill that the best players in the world are really good at. There are a lot of guys that, will make 7 birdies in a round, but all those birdies happened after their bogeys, or all the bogeys happened after their birdies. And there's definitely something to be said for, being able to bounce back from bad scores is great, but it's also just as common to, not do the right things after a good stretch of golf that leads to just kind of silly, preventable bogeys or doubles.
Yeah. All right, Austin. Thank you so much for the time, and I think these guys appreciated it. I hope they did.
Yeah, no, yeah, sorry for ranting on certain things. It's fun.
No,
I enjoy it.
that's what you're here for.
This is fun. This is fun for me because I haven't talked about golf as much as I'm used to, and so I enjoy it. So thank you guys
All right. Well, maybe we'll badger you and come back again.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you guys ever have any questions, I'd love to answer them, and I like questions too because it makes me kind of think. A couple of those questions that made me think, especially like the having a score in mind, because I just haven't really come to something I'm pleased with in regards to that. So yeah, always a learning curve.
All right. Thanks for hopping on, guys.
Yeah, thank you guys.
I maybe had this thing recorded, so I might clip a couple pieces of it and see what happens.
Sounds good.
All right. See you guys.
All right. Bye, Alex. Bye, guys.
Yeah.